We're 1 week away from what you worked so hard for.
It's NAIA Football with Dannelly and Donley.
And don't you let a moment go without thinking about what's there for you to reach out and grasp.
Into another week of NAIA Football with Dannelly and Donley. I, of course, am Jason Dannelly, one half of that combination. We've got an exciting show for you tonight because, well, it was an exciting weekend of NAIA Football. We had a couple upsets in the top 10, a big upset really in the top 5. Great game between Marion and Indiana Wesleyan that we're going to talk at length about, plus some other shakeups down the top 25, which have made the entire NAIA Championship Series postseason picture look a little bit more cloudy than maybe what it just did a couple weeks ago. So needless to say, we've got a lot of NAIA football to talk about, and I will bring in now two-time national championship head coach, multiple coordinator of the year, also a hockey dad, and more importantly, my friend, Mr. Pat Donley. Pat, how's it going, buddy?
Jason, how are you? We're live, man. We're live.
We are live. Here's what people don't understand. Like, there's like a staging before this show goes on, and I like it that Pat joins about 4 to 5 minutes before we go on, because then I know he's there, and it's like, okay, the show can go on, but we only get that much time to talk, because otherwise, like, we'll just do the entire show behind the scenes and then realize, oh, we got to tell everybody else about all the stuff now too. So
yeah, that's good.
Good to have you on, buddy.
You too, man. Sorry, I got to be dad a little bit too, kind of get the kids wrangled up and get ready for school tomorrow and almost bedtime, and you know how it goes. But yeah, we're here ready to talk some ball, and what a great weekend, and ready to get into it. It's gonna be exciting.
Big weekend in the Donley family. I'd be remiss if I did not say congratulations to the family, to your dad, 350th win in his career. Big win this weekend over Concordia to get the upset, and we'll talk about that game later on. But probably a atmosphere in Fort Wayne.
It was awesome. Yeah, just really happy. What a great day for football, and yeah, happy for dad. And the guys came out and responded well after a couple tough weeks, and yeah, I'm sure we'll get into it later here. But yeah, congratulations to the old man. Had a great day, and 350 wins. That's a lot of wins, Jake. That's a lot. Any
idea what the number is at St. Francis alone? Because the other ones came at Georgetown and then some at Cal PA. But
yeah, you're in 350. He's got to be. It's 200 plus. So
yeah, over 200.
It's in that 200. I know. I was a part of 189 of them. So
okay,
I was there from 04 to 21. So yeah, it's quite a few. So he's in the I'd say the 230s, 240s at St. Francis. I have to look that up. But that's a good question. Yeah, he had a good number before he came. So Dad was a head coach at 26, so he started really, really young. And
that's right, because he was at Anderson even before Georgetown.
Yeah, they were in NAIA school back in the 70s and early 80s. Started the NAIA level, played at that school, and then coached at 26 years old. So he's been head coach a long, long time. He's been the boss, more than 3/4 of his life. So he's been at it a while.
Well, let's get into it. Let's just start talking about what happened in NAIA football this weekend. And, just kind of how we're going to do things is we're going to go through the top 25 and then, of course, the results from the top 25 and who some of the key games from there. And then we'll get into the postseason, some of the conference standings and some of the key things that you need to know about as we head into, sadly, the final week of the regular season. It's crazy, Pat. This has gone very fast this year.
Fast season. It really has been. We've been doing this, a handful of weeks now. This has just flown by as well. It seemed like, again, we did the show on last Tuesday because of your travels, but yeah, these days are rolling by fast, and we always talk about, the old guy talking thing. It's now we're in our 40s, Jay. It seemed like it was yesterday we were in our 20s, but yeah, this time just flies. So,
yeah. That's also why we've moved the show up to 6 o'clock too. Us old guys, speak
for yourself. You're on farmer time, man.
That is true.
Yeah, but with the chickens in the morning.
Yeah, when that's the other thing though too. Monday morning that 5 a.m. alarm goes off pretty early there. So,
indeed.
But let's get into the top 25, top 5. Northwestern. I gotta get my notes here too because I actually made notes on several of these games. So Northwestern plays Dakota Wesleyan this weekend. Relatively I don't want to say easy win, but they handled North Dakota Wesley in that game. Gramstead, 224 yards passing in that game, had 65 rushing. Connor McQuillan, the running back for Northwestern, 127 yards on the ground. Grandview, they run it up on William Penn for as much as Grandview does run things up. 35-6. Jackson Waring, 245 yards on 18 of 27 passing. They held William Penn to just 187 yards in that game. And unfortunately for Grandview's defensive average, they were slightly above their defensive average of what is now 5.9 points per game. So pretty stout there, to say the least.
They're so good defensively. It's going to be interesting when we get in the postseason, those matchups, if that defense can hold serve like they've done all year. That's just impressive.
Yeah, I definitely want to see Grandview at a conference against some different offenses.
High-flying offense would be great to see. Great matchup.
Yeah, well, maybe, unless Grandview's defense is just absolutely for real. And it's like, oh, wow, they are so much better than some of these other teams right now. Morningside with a loss to Dordt. This was one vaguely on our radar last week, and we said, well, Morningside's got to take care of business. Otherwise, their postseason could be in jeopardy. They're 5 right now in the NAIA coaches poll. We'll likely see a drop. Typically, a loss to a rated team in this scenario, you see a 6, 7, 8 point rating drop. So you could see Morningside this week drop to 11, 12, 13, 14, possibly. That still puts them in the postseason. But nonetheless, not a great situation for the Mustangs to be in. Then, of course, the big game that we talked about a lot this week, and a lot of people were talking about, lived up to the billing between Marion and Indiana Wesleyan, 42-40 in the final. We'll take a look at the stats. Pat, you actually got an opportunity to watch this game yesterday. I watched it live yesterday as it was happening. And for all the NAIA games I've seen this year, pretty safe to say that this is definitely the NAIA game of the season so far.
I don't think there's any question. It's kind of funny because what an exciting game. If you love offensive football, it's fantastic. Up and down the field, just constant. But it's sloppy at times. Turnovers, special teams issues for both sides. Kind of back and forth because of mistakes. So scores happen. I mean, Marion jumps out to a 17-0 lead just on egregious turnovers in the first quarter from Indiana Wesleyan. Really uncharacteristic of them. They're very, very sound. Stokes is a really good decision maker. Made some just kind of had a fumble on a great quarterback run that gave the ball back. Next drive throws a pick right to a slot corner guy, nickel player, right to him. It's like that's not unlike him. Iowa didn't show up the first quarter, Jay. I mean, it was kind of a weird deal, 17-0, but then they turned it on from that point and really cleaned things up. They blocked a punt that led to some points. Did some really, really good things. Both teams back and forth. I think when you really look at, we talk about the top 5, both these teams are top 5 teams. I know, Marion will drop now having lost a game, but man, are they a good team. Both of those teams, I think, very efficient. The quarterback play, once they got through Stokes, at least that first quarter, after that, Bundalo and Stokes, both those last 3 quarters were insanely efficient, really, really sharp, threw some good footballs. The decision-making was outstanding. It was a fun game to watch. Good balance, run and pass from both offenses. But it's the most offense I've seen from Marion for sure this season. Really more explosive, taking some more shot plays. You saw that much, much more, being more aggressive. But I think both teams are very, very good quality teams that I think can go deep in the postseason, probably see each other again if I had to guess.
Yeah, I would guess they'll probably see one another again at some point in the postseason. You talked about how they were explosive. I saw, again, I've watched a little bit of Marion football this year, not a lot, a little bit of Indiana Wesleyan this year. They've been on ESPN3, and for me, they're playing at 11 o'clock in the Central, so that's usually the first game that I get on is whoever they're playing. And like you said, Marion early on really took advantage of some mistakes. Played very solid football. They got up 17-0 there early, but then Indiana Wesleyan creeps back into it, makes some good halftime adjustments, nearly scoreless in the third quarter, as you can see there. And then they turned it on in the fourth quarter. Like you said, turnovers happen. There was some special teams mistakes and a special teams touchdown by Marion. Really everything you want to see in a small college football game. And it was a great win by Indiana Wesleyan. Xander Stokes, I thought really turned it on and stepped up in this game for Indiana Wesleyan. They got their running back core is a little bit banged up. Levi Tidwell played very well as well in this game, but not to discount anything from Marion. I thought Zach Bundelow played a very good game and had some really athletic kind of scrambles at time that kept things alive and even put points on the board, for the Knights.
Yeah, I've watched Zach Bundelow forever. I recruited him out of high school. He was one of our guys we recruited when I was at St. Francis and then choosing Marion. But he's been a 5-year starter there. He's been there, seems like, forever with the COVID year and all that extra. And he, like you said, very, very efficient. You saw some mobility, which you didn't see the big guy do much prior to that. Really had some timely runs to keep drives alive and, continue drives into scoring situations. So I thought both quarterbacks were outstanding. I mean, I really do. Some of the better performances I've seen. Again, you take that first quarter away from IWU. From that point on, they really took off, and what a great offensive performance from them following that first quarter.
IWU, that's what you're calling him. I was like,
that's
Iowa.
No, IWU, yeah,
IWU.
Yeah, sorry, IWU, IWU. I guess they call them that for short here. At least the league around here does. I know our basketball teams and other sport teams at St. Francis. It's the rivals. IWU. Always hear IWU.
Got it. See, that's why it's good to bring people in to host a show from different areas of the country. You learn a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
But great
what
game.
What a facility, though, man. What a facility. Isn't that place great? Man.
Oh, absolutely beautiful.
First class. Yeah.
So it was funny. My spouse walked into the room the other day and I had the game on and she was like, "Ooh, wow, that's a really nice field. What game are you watching? I'm watching Indiana Wesleyan Marion." She's like, "Is this an NAIA game?" I'm like, "Yeah, it is." And she's like, "Wow. That's really nice." So
great broadcast too. I mean, just first class, just done really, really well. Yeah.
And then she asked if I would go watch it in the garage.
You got relegated? Get out of here.
Yeah, got relegated. Oh, that's really nice. The TV in the garage
Saturday.
works too.
Football Saturday, huh?
No, I got to stick around. She had errands to run, so it worked out well. So this was one that, if you could say last week where my confidence level was that Morningside was going to win this game, I was about 85-15, just because Morningside has had little blips here and there. The Jamestown game, Benedictine, where they've trailed, they've struggled. And I kind of felt like, well, they're pulling things together. So I'm still confident Morningside's going to win this. Dort comes out and puts 21 up in the first half. Morningside gets a turnover at the end of the first half to get their 7 points on the board. Then in the third quarter, not a lot happened. Dort really had nothing happening for them offensively. Morningside's first 2 possessions in the third quarter, they got into the red zone and came away with nothing before they put 7 points on the board. Then it looked like late they were probably going to take this one 24-21, but Dort put together an outstanding drive. Colton Cruz was able to, scamper around with the ball a little bit and find the end zone at the end of the game. They ran the ball pretty well. For the entire game, Dort did. They're kind of a triple option, a little bit of a RPO game going with them. Brendan Piper, 111 yards in this game. So Dort, gold star for them, as corny as that sounds, but gold star for them. They got up 21-7, then they gave up the lead, got down 24-21, and they still weren't deflated. And they came back and they won this game on the road at Morningside. So you got to give a lot of credit to Dort coming away with the victory over one of the top teams in the country that has struggled a little bit, but we kind of felt even after watching that game against Northwestern last week that, yep, they're still there. They're for real. Dort, great victory here.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think this was a game that Dort won, or did Morningside stub their toe numerous times and 3 interceptions, things like that? Was that the result? Was it more of Morningside losing or Dort winning the game?
I think it was Dort winning just by how they responded. They came out, they played well early. Their defense was pretty stout at times against Morningside. Now, Morningside has got some struggles, throwing the ball at time. And you see that, they had 4 different quarterbacks, I believe, in this game. Zach Chevalier took a majority of the snaps. You see he threw for 201 yards there. Lennox Brown was taking snaps at quarterback, albeit a lot of times when he had the ball, he was going to be running it, which is indicative of his rushing stats, 7 carries for 73 yards and a touchdown. But I do feel like Dort came out in this game ready to play, and Morningside taking that lead late. They had an opportunity for their defense to step up, but Dort found a way. So I believe Dort, won this game, and it wasn't so much Morningside stubbing themselves, but I think 2 losses in a row after 78 straight wins in the GPAC, that's a little something to talk about.
Yeah, and 4 quarterbacks. And again, we've seen, Brown kind of, intermittently throughout the season, played pretty much exclusively against the Northwestern in the Northwestern game. Like, how's it all shaken out? I'm just trying to figure out, what they're trying to do with, the in and out with quarterbacks, different guys.
Yeah, I think right now it's they don't have a clear cut number one, and there are some games where Brown makes more sense based on the other team's ability to stop the run, and in some games where Chevalier or the other quarterback's name's escaping me at this time. I'm sorry about that. The kid out of Kansas City, I can't remember his name, but you guys know who I'm talking about. I think that there's some game plans that are more indicative to their skills, but not to go with the old coaching adage, but if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. That's kind of what some people will say. Morningside's been able to get away with it for a good majority of the year. I still think they'll make some noise in the playoffs, but they just got to get consistency at that position, and it doesn't have to be from Chevalier. It doesn't have to be from, it does have to be from one of them. It doesn't have to be from all of them, but I do believe whatever game plan they come up with, they've got to have that person, step up and be able to play the entire game so that the rest of the game plan can come together.
78 straight wins in the GPAC.
Yeah.
That's
insane.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
We were talking in our pre-show. I don't think they've traveled in the playoffs, the first round since 2004.
Yeah, I think
they have been home that long hosting.
Yeah, I can't remember a time that they've traveled in the first round other than when they came out to St. Francis to play. There may have been one year, 08, 09, something like that, but otherwise, at least in the first round, they've been essentially in the top 8 and had the ability to at least host that first round game.
Yeah, different territory for Coach Ryan and the group there. It's going to be interesting. They're still a good football team. We've watched them too much. We know it's there. Again, like you said, we got to find an identity offensively. Maybe they just make a decision or go with one quarterback and they're going to hang their hat there and go from that point and see what they have. But, they have a winning tradition there. There's a culture. There's a great offensive culture there. I still believe that they're going to get things figured out, don't you? I do.
Absolutely. I just, there's certain programs you just have confidence in, and you see them, stub their toe late in the season here, have to deal with a little bit of adversity. And it's like, well, yeah, but that staff, that team, that culture, they'll get it figured out. Are they going to make a run to the national championship this year? I don't think so. That's just based on the games I've seen and the talent that's in the NAIA and all the other teams that are out there. But that's not to say that they're not going to go into the postseason, make some noise, and cause some headaches for some teams out there. That's 100% sure. Moving on to our next 5 in the top 25. We had Kaiser knock down Weber International. They were up big in this game. Bryce Veasley, 14 for 20 throwing, 144 yards. Andrew Burnett, 97 yards rushing in that game. College of Idaho was off this week. Then Georgetown and University of the Cumberlands. Darius Neal rushes for 201 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. He's a returning All-American, and he's really turning it on. He had a long of 60 in that game. And then Lindsey Wilson in Cumberland. Not much of a fight from the Phoenix in that game. Lindsey Wilson bounces back after that loss to Georgetown. They put up 45 in this game. Ethan Cash, 263 yards passing, 4 touchdowns in the game. Their running back Dawson, 117 yards and a touchdown. So a nice one there for Lindsey Wilson. But, the game that most of us were looking at was this one between Montana Western and Carroll College. Now, granted, I will explain to people again, the ratings you see here are the Victory Sports Network ratings. They aren't the NAI coaches ratings. And frankly, that's just because I don't have 17 screens to go back and forth and match everything up. So we go with this. But this was also one of the premier games of the week between Montana Western and Carroll, and the Bulldogs coming away with a huge victory here, Pat.
I hate to be a broken record. We've talked about 3 consecutive weeks of the parity of the Frontier League. Just any given week, it's like the NFL. You see teams in the NFL that you on paper you would never think of dreaming of beating a top team, and it's happening all the time in the Frontier Conference. I mean, every single week. I mean, teams have to buckle it up. And I think more the score more maybe than the result overall of Montana Western, winning this football game, but the overall score is really surprising. Because we watch Carroll College extensively, and I think they're a quality team. It's a head scratcher for me at least.
The way I see it, Montana Western and Carroll played very even in the first half, and I watched a good majority of this game, but Montana Western, credit to them, second half adjustments. They were able to, maybe get things going with their game plan a little bit better in the second half, held Carroll scoreless there to come away with the 38-17 victory. They had a late touchdown to get it to 38. It was really, 31-17 with a couple minutes left to go in that ball game before Montana Western added the late score. But they can sling it, man. They can throw the ball all over the field. Palindry, 388 yards, 4 touchdowns, didn't throw an interception. Receiving wise, 3 receivers, all over 100 yards with Shipley, Norse, and Kirkley there. Kirkley comes away with 3 touchdowns. Eli Norse did not have any touchdowns in this game, but 123 yards, still one of the top leading receivers in the country by receiving yards after this game. Funny story, or at least, one of those quirky things you find in the NAIA. Here's 3 wide receivers, Pat, all over 100 yards, and 2 of them are from Dillon, Montana, the wide receiver mecca that is Dillon, Montana. Yeah, so Norse and Kirkley being the ones from Dillon, and tremendous game by Coach Norse to get this victory, and really set Montana Western up now for the ability to basically guarantee themselves an at-large into the postseason.
So the Frontier 3 teams getting in, you think? And it seems that way.
Carroll's got to hold on this weekend because Carroll, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but Carroll's got Montana Tech this weekend. If they lose to Montana Tech, that probably knocks them out of that at-large contention. And to talk a little bit about the postseason before we get into breaking down the rest of these games, I need to bring us back up full cam here. I'm also the producer of this show as we do it. So one thing about the postseason that people need to understand, some of the changes have gone with it. So 20 teams obviously make the postseason this year. That's not news to anyone. Learned a little bit more in the last couple of weeks. Your top 12 teams are going to get buys, and your 12 conference winners, they're going to all get that first round bye. And then the remaining 8 teams, they'll play in that first round. Now, the way that the at-larges are selected, this is not the traditional format that we're used to in the NAIA Championship Series, where you wait for that top 25 to come out and then you start counting down and go, okay, them. It is not guaranteed just because you're rated 15th and say Carroll drops to 18th that now the number 15 team will get in over the 18. It is a committee that's going to look at the entire body of work to make some of those determinations and not just determine it off of the top 25 rating. Now, the top 25 rating is definitely going to play in heavily to their decision-making, but it's not a guarantee. So just because you move up in the ratings, and what it does, and I like this, Pat, and you could speak to this as a coach, what it does is it protects some of these teams that are in really good conferences that played well all season long, but you get that loss at the end of the season. So now you drop 5 or 6 spots and somebody else sneaks in. It's more of an examination of the entire body of work. I think some people will love it. Obviously, if your team gets in, you're going to love it. If you're the team that's left out, you're not going to like it.
Yeah. The big thing is I think you're rewarding conference champions, which is it's important because you remember back in the old days, Jay, I mean, heck, a team could be undefeated. Let's talk if it's a Hart team back in the day that would
William Penn.
Yeah,
William Penn is the number one example. They lost the first week of the year, second week of the year, went 10-1, didn't make the postseason.
Oh yeah, that was a handful of years ago. I remember that. But even these teams that let's say like a KCAC team that goes undefeated, wins the conference, but never rose high enough in the standings to host a home game, for instance. Now you're rewarded with that bye, which is very, very nice. You win the league, that type of thing. Back in the day, so much was regional as well, how things paired up.
Mm-hmm.
I think this format certainly seems to be more fair, I guess, when you kind of think about the body of work of each team and, again, rewarding conference champions and having those at-large teams that had successful years but playing great leagues. You look at, the Mid-States East situation. You look at, really the West, too, big game coming up with St. X and Roosevelt, that situation. The Frontier League, College of Idaho has Southern Oregon this week, big game.
Yep.
Or no, excuse me, that's Carroll College has.
Carroll College has got Montana Tech.
Montana Tech, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yep.
then College Vito has Southern Oregon, so another good quality
Mhm.
opponent. So there's 3 teams there. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really exciting here this last week to see how things shake out. But the quality of these conferences as a whole, getting those 3 teams in, like you said, those at-large bids that have had success throughout the year and being rewarded for it.
Yeah, I think it's a good move by the NAIA. I think more teams in the postseason in this style of format I like a lot, because you even go back a couple years ago to the Dakota Athletic Conference and then the North Star Athletic Association. Sometimes you're playing a double round robin. You're playing teams twice. You've got teams that beat one another up, and you got a number 18 team that's going to make it in. They lose late in the season. Now they drop to 22. Oh, they're not in the top 20, so they don't make the NAIA Championship Series. We've done away with that now, which I'm very much in favor of, because now we can actually see, and each conference can have a representative in the postseason. So we move on to our next group of 5 in the NAIA top 25, with Bethel taking on Campbellsville this week. Let me get my notepad out here, my old school notepad. Some people would put this up like on screens, and I'm not going to do it. Bethel, Campbellsville, Joaquin Colazo. I'm butchering that name. I apologize. 24 of 34. Yeah, sounds right to you. 24 of 34, 254 yards, 3 touchdowns in that game. St. Xavier, Olivet Nazarene, Amari Venerable, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns there. Texas Wesleyan and Langston in that game. It was 34-6 in the third quarter before Texas Wesleyan goes on to the 42-19 victory. They had a defensive touchdown, also a safety in that game. Carson Rogers, 16 of 28, 206 yards in that game. Excellent performance by Texas Wesleyan. And then Benedictine over Missouri Baptist, 34-16. Jackson Dooley, 17 of 29 in that game, 369 yards, 4 touchdowns. His number 1 target as a receiver was Jacob Gathright, 179 yards for Gathright and 2 touchdowns in that game. But the one that we are keeping our eye on, obviously, Evangel in Southwestern. Got the full stats for this one. Evangel comes away with the victory. 40 seconds left in this game, 17-14. They sneak by RJ Walkley, 20 of 41, 318 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. His number 1 wide receiver was Brock Lyle. He had 5 catches for 130 yards. Also, Dylan Hester, 8 catches for 118 yards. Every time I hear the name Hester, like I imagine what this guy looks like. And it's probably not the Hester last name that everybody else is used to, but he certainly played along those lines this week with 118 yards. And then Bradley Myers, who leads the NAIA in tackles, chips in 13 tackles, had a sack, 2 tackles for loss in this game. That was a great performance by Evangel. It basically douses the hopes of Southwestern trying to sneak into the postseason. 89 yards for Howell on the passing side, receiving wise, kind of split between 2 guys there. And some good performances on defense, obviously, to keep Southwestern in this game. Defense has done that quite a bit for him this year. But Evangel gets a 17-14 victory and looks to be in the driver's seat in their half of the KCAC, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit.
Yeah, valiant effort from Southwestern, just came up a little bit short. Evangel's been consistent all season. Good for them to sustain and have that undefeated season going into the last week of the season. So good on them for sure. That's by the way, you're buzzing tonight with the stats, man. You're rolling like the notes. Look at you, man.
Actually prepared, and it's the evolution of this show. It's like, okay, we need to have some stats. We got to break down the top 25, have some other stuff. Well, when we go through the top 25, it's like, well, I want to say something about these other teams too. So I made a couple of notes.
Your level of preparation tonight is just, it's fantastic. I'm blown away, buddy.
I have to prepare because I don't have the football knowledge that you do as a coach for all the years that you did. Like, you can watch a couple minutes of film and be like, oh, they did this, this, and this. They did this on defense. Watch for okay, I got it. And I'm just like, that guy threw the ball to the other guy. Did he caught it? It was a pretty catch.
You're way too kind. It's fun being out 2 seasons. Like you see new stuff. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. I haven't seen that before. So yeah, it goes quickly, believe me. But yeah, it's I'm just really impressed with your prep tonight, buddy.
Well, it's like this is what I did for a living for several years. So, we got
an exceptionally high level too. By the way, I was checking out some archive videos of
Oh,
the old
baby.
selection shows, and
Oh, man.
the sport coat on, and Jason Dale without the white beard, youthful. Those are
Yes,
great.
all certain suit and tie. One of my favorite ones that we did, John Thayer and I did it the first year VSN
John
came
was
back
good, yeah.
after the college fans acquisition, and then after that all folded. But we were at Johnny's Tavern in Kansas City, broadcasting live just down the street from the NAIA national office, and that was a lot of fun. And it was great for me because I could just have Thayer host the show, and then I could like do these stats and add all the other stuff. Thayer was awesome. He's, for anybody that follows NAIA football, Thayer is now the Division I football and men's basketball voice for the University of South Dakota. So if you're ever want to check out some FCS football, yep, he is the guy calling all those games. So yeah, John, when USD comes to Fargo and plays, him and I usually get together and talk old times and laugh, and he makes fun of me for all the stupid things that happen behind the scenes. Me splitting my pants wide open, changing a spare tire. It was, we could talk for days on that.
It's fun stuff. Sorry, that's the ad lib stuff. The stories in between. The football coverage here. Sorry.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good.
Videos though.
Yeah, it's a. I've got a hard drive full of them that I could probably share. So.
There's a bunch on YouTube.
Yeah,
those want to go back in the archives and check out, the selection shows from 2011. Fantastic.
A lot of fun.
That was must-see TV back in the day, though. I tell you, man, we had those playoff selections. Those were we were front and center on those. They were fun.
Yeah, it was a heck of a lot of fun doing those back in the day. We'll have fun next weekend when we do this too, because the NAIA does their selection show. They stream it out at 6:00 while this show's going on. So we'll coordinate something and do this show live while it's going out, and probably thoroughly screw things up.
Need to get a sport coat on, go look professional, put a tie on next week.
We'll go get my bright red college fan sport coat and wear that.
There we go.
So St. Thomas, they knock off Southeastern 33, not really knock off, but they defeated Southeastern 33-21. They actually trailed in this game 14-0 to start. Then St. Thomas scored 27 straight to go up 27-14. Keely Watson, 25 of 35 for 360 passing in that game and 3 touchdowns. Dickinson, Valley City State, game that we had our eye on because it meant something in the North Star. Valley City had a chance to make some noise. Dickinson State just really took over in this game and led the entire way. Will Madler, 15 of 21 passing, 239 yards, 3 touchdowns. Brandon Zuroff, 94 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Montana Tech lays it to Montana Northern, 28-0. Tech held Northern to just 97 yards in that game. Blake Thielen, 19 of 31 throwing, 302 yards, 2 scores. And then Reinhardt over Kentucky Christian. Reinhardt had 500 yards of total offense. There's the word. Got it. Colin Fletcher, 111 yards receiving and a touchdown in that game. And of course, we kind of went through Montana Western already getting the win over Carroll College there. So any thoughts to add on this group of 5, Pat, before I go to the next
you see the consistency with Dickinson State. Great win for them. We were kind of looking at that game last week and highlighting that as a possible, solid matchup for them to have to beat, Valley City to maintain, that driver's seat position for the conference. We talk about them always being consistent, always being there in the end, and here we are again. And we talked about, some of the others. And boy, Reinhardt is a scary, scary team. I know 2-loss team. I know they lost to some teams at a higher level. But you wonder how they're going to, match up with somebody next week, or, next week's pairings going to the playoffs, how scary they'll be for someone having going against those guys. Man, oh man, that's a tough draw for anyone in the first round.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the first round, but we still got another week that we have to get through. Rounding out the top 25 here, of course, Southwestern, they lost to Evangel. Ottawa, Arizona was idle. Concordia, Michigan, dropped that game to St. Francis, 34-24. They've got Indiana Wesleyan next week. Challenging matchup a little bit maybe for Indiana Wesleyan in that game. Kansas Wesleyan, they were in the driver's seat in their half of the KCAC. They lost in overtime to Ottawa. Ottawa undefeated in that side of the KCAC. So right now, Ottawa holds the keys to the postseason to go in that half of the KCAC. We'll talk more about that. Lindsay, Louisiana Christian, They were idle this week. Kansas Wesleyan came out in this game. We were tied up at half team, 14-all, went into overtime. Ottawa was able to get the score. You look at the stats there for Ottawa, 96 yards on the ground by Ruth and a touchdown. Maples 158 yards, 2 scores in this game. It was a very evenly matched game, well-played game between these two. Rivalry in the KCAC, and Kansas Wesleyan, who had crept up in these last couple weeks to have us thinking they were the ones that were going to be coming out of this half of the KCAC. Ottawa takes control, and with 1 week left in the season, all Ottawa has to do is beat Tabor, and they'll be in the postseason as the representative of the KCAC, this half of the KCAC.
Yeah, good for those guys. You're undefeated. You said they were
undefeated in their
the conference. Lost a couple games, I think, non-conference for the crossover.
Yep, correct.
Yeah. Hold and serve on their end of the conference. So good for them, and pulling out a huge win there in overtime. You go back and take a look at that overtime game, or the part of that game, to see how things shook out. But it's always exciting. So good to see these teams playing well.
You got Concordia went to St. Francis this week, and when I looked at the stats from this game, Pat, and you could probably tell me I'm wrong, but when I used to look at the University of St. Francis statistical line, when things were up and roaring and rearing and going, you saw the running back statistics, people that ran, and you saw about this many people on the page. And then wide receivers that caught a ball, you saw about this many people on the page. When I looked at these stats this week, it looked like that again. Ball spread out all over the place. Cam Peterson, 83 yards on the ground. You're the wide receiver core for St. Francis. A lot of different guys with 2 catches, 1 catches. What? English is a problem for me. 1 catch. There we go. But needless to say, this was a complete game that St. Francis put together at a time against a top-rated opponent in the NAIA.
No doubt. I think it was 10 guys caught balls for the Cougars yesterday. So they spread the ball around a lot. And you're right, Jason. We were blessed with great depth, in kind of the glory years of, playing in national championship games and all that. And we've said this all along. And this is the best win the Cougars have had in probably a good 4 years. It really is. It's a really tremendous win. They took care of the football first and foremost. And that's really been their issue the last couple of weeks, and losses to, a good game, a competitive game gets Marion 2 weeks ago. They still had some turnovers. Then last week was just a mess. 5 turnovers, 5 interceptions against, Indiana Wesleyan, which is too good of a team. You can't be anybody doing that, let alone a top 5 team. So they took care of the football. I thought Grant Grimmel was very, very efficient. Again, smart with his decision-making, held on to it, didn't force, something that wasn't there, where maybe last week or the week before he would try to force something that would turn it over. Very, very efficient. 20 of 31, and just solid football game. Again, took care of the ball, played strong on defense. I thought collectively St. Francis tackled well, the best I've seen tackle. It seems so simple to say, but good team tackling, gang tackling, getting people to pursue quickly. You could see it early in the game. I mean, St. Francis came out, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was I think it was 20 to 3, maybe, or 20 to 3, I think, at the second quarter, and really controlled from the very, very beginning. So it was great to see them do that. So, yeah, I was there front and center for it, and just collectively, a good victory for St. Francis football. So it was good to see. Concordia's got some things going. I think there's some injury issues. Gavin Brooks, their starting quarterback, has been banged up really the last half of the season here. I think they have some with this, was a slalom kid. Good 6. He walked past me. I mean, I'm almost 6'3", Jason. This guy's like 6'5", 6'6". Good looking freshman, redshirt freshman kid, who I think did some really good things. And I could see him probably competing next week against Indiana Wesleyan. He's a healthy player, young guy, can do some things, kind of more of a run element to his game. I think Concordia's a good football team. I just think they're banged up, is what it is, to some level. So, again, great win by St. Francis. I think Concordia's quality. I think they're, kind of going through the late season, injury woes. That should be a good game next week against Indiana Wesleyan. I really think that it would be, because Concordia's a well-coached team. I have a lot of respect for what those guys do, and there's a lot of pride there. So their season's not over, for sure.
No, not at all. And Indiana Wesleyan, you kind of always wonder a little bit. You just had the big win. Do you have that little bit of a letdown? Concordia comes out in this game, maybe surprises you a little bit. I also think it'll be a great game next week between Indiana Wesleyan and Concordia in that one. So we get into our postseason talk here. So we're going to go through each conference, their top standings, the teams that, are towards the top, have a shot into the postseason. starting first with the Appalachian Athletic Conference. You've got Reinhardt at 5-0. Reinhardt very much in the driver's seat, even with a loss by Reinhardt this week. They hold the tiebreaker over Pikeville. So, the Eagles look like they're going to be the ones in the Appalachian. We go to the frontier, and here's where we can talk a little bit. So you got College of Idaho, a one-loss team this year, losing to Montana Tech. Montana Western, a one-loss team this year in the conference, losing to College of Idaho. Carroll, of course, has now lost to College of Idaho and Montana Western. Montana Tech has a loss to has a loss. I'm blanking. Has a loss to College of Idaho, right? Yeah. Yes. Because College of Idaho's lost. No, College of Idaho lost to Montana Tech.
It's a lot going on here, Jake.
A lot going on.
This crazy conference here.
But regardless, here you look at the full schedule here, and somebody's tweeting at me, I'm sure right now, and screaming because I don't have this memorized. I'm sorry, there's 96 teams in the NAIA. I don't know them all.
A lot going on.
So, but Montana Tech right now, effectively at 6-3, and given where they're rated, probably not going to make the postseason. Don't quote me on it. If they're in the top 25, they got a chance, but probably not based upon everything else happening in this conference. If Carroll wants to make it into the postseason, they have to beat Montana Tech this week to finish 6-2 in the conference, 8-2 overall. Montana Western, they've got to continue on, get that victory this week. College of Idaho, they've got to continue on, get that victory this week. Not going to be just an easy walk through the park for either of those teams, but that Carroll-Montana Tech game, once again in this conference, is going to mean a lot.
No doubt. Again, we've talked about so much. It's every single week. There seems like new happenings all the time in this league. There's an upset, at least on paper, from a standpoint of an upset. It seems to be every week, so it's going to be exciting.
Moving on to the Great Plains Athletic Conference, Northwestern has things locked up. They are 9-0. Morningside now 7-2, 8-2 overall. They've lost those two in a row. Dort sitting there at 7-2, given how they could be rated in the NAIA coaches poll. They now maybe have a glimmer of a hope for an at-large. They're going to be in the top 25. They just got a nice victory over Morningside. The thing that is going to kill Dort right now is a loss earlier this season to Midland. They lost to Midland in a game that they probably should have won. Needless to say, the Warriors got that W, and that could be what holds Dort out of the postseason. That's why, in some of these conferences, every single game that's out there counts. It counts big, and it can affect you down the road.
Huge win to their resume, obviously, beating Morningside just last week. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Moving on, Hart North, it's Grandview.
Easy one.
I mean, don't have to go through ratings and scenarios, anything like that. It's Grandview. So we move on. So we go to the Hart South. A little bit more happening here. Benedictine sitting undefeated right now. They've got Mid-American Nazarene this week. If MNU knocks off Benedictine, then you've got three teams all possibly sitting at 4-1. I'm not 100% sure on the tiebreaker in the Hart South. So that gets thrown into the mix as well. Also, if Benedictine loses, that moves them down a little bit in the ratings. That maybe causes a little bit of turmoil in terms of hosting a game or traveling for a game. So a lot can still happen here in the Hart South this late in the season when it seemed like, Benedictine was just going to be the stronghold. They've got this game the final week of the season that could jump up and bite them. And
you can see the Hart South is going to be beneficiaries of the new format of the playoffs, because a couple of these teams have been in the old traditional format would have been eliminated. And now you've got some at-large opportunities here. You can see that here in the Hart South.
Moving on to the KCAC Bissell. So Ottawa, with their win over Kansas Wesleyan this week, they improved to 6-4 overall, 5-0 in the conference. They've got Tabor this week. If they beat Tabor, that'll put them at 6-0, 7-4. They'll be the automatic qualifier out of the Bissell. That's not an easy game. Mostly because, even though Tabor record-wise might not be outstanding this year, they play the top teams in their conference very tough, and they're very well coached with Mike Gardner, who has been at Tabor forever. He stepped away for a cup of coffee at Malone for a little bit before he came back to Tabor. And, Tabor has ridden that wave. They've had really good years. They've had years where they've been down, and going into the final week of the season, I could fully expect that the Blue Jays are going to be well coached and ready to possibly spoil what Ottawa's got going for them.
Coach Gardner's always fun. He's called the mad scientist. he would just get
Yes.
crazy on defense, all the exotic things that we would see. He was at Malone. They were in our league back in those days. And good guy. Happy he's doing well.
Yeah, he is. He's been one of the longtime NAIA football coaches, and happy to see him, still around and looking for some success in the upcoming years. So here's the conference that a lot of people will just look at and say, "Well, Evangel's undefeated, so Evangel's got the bid here." And I thought that earlier today when I was putting together these graphics. But if Evangel loses this week to Bethel, Kansas, and Friends wins, all those teams are going to be 4-1. So then it goes into a tiebreaker procedure, and that tiebreaker in the KCAC has to do with points. I have to pull up some notes here real quick because I was actually getting some messages earlier today on this. So if Bethel beats Evangel, there'll be a 3-way tie. Friends, Bethel, Evangel. Friends would most likely go because it's decided on the scores of their competitors being examined. The team with the largest total margin of victory versus the teams in the tie will be the conference champion and playoff representative. So a couple weeks ago, when Friends beat Bethel 43-0, that could potentially be what gives Friends the opportunity to win this half of the KCAC if Evangel slips up with Bethel this week. So in a conference that you would just look at on paper and say, well, it's decided Evangel's undefeated, they're 10-0, they could potentially not get the automatic in this half of the conference.
A lot has to happen. I think Evangel's a good team. Can't imagine them, stubbing their toe the last week of the season, the way they've overcome adversity and found ways to win throughout the entire year. And crazier things I'm sure have happened at some point, but Evangel seems like they're kind of a team of destiny, going undefeated, win the league outright. But we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be exciting. Again,
Mid-South Conference, Georgetown pretty much has got this one locked up for their half. You've got Bethel and Lindsey Wilson playing one another this week. This is a tough one to examine because I think the winner of Bethel and Lindsey Wilson will get that at large. They'll be the ones that make it into the postseason. But the team that loses, how far do they fall? Do they fall out of contention? Or is this one, as we talked about with the new playoff format, that they benefit from having the committee actually look at the sum of all the games here and say, now, wait a second, let's hold on. Those two teams played the last week of the season. That team dropped 5 or 6 spots. Yes, it put them down, but they're a team that is deserving of making the NAIA postseason.
Does it matter who wins in that? But whether it's 3 or 2 teams that get in. For instance, if Lindsey Wilson loses a third game, are they out?
I think that could affect them. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that could be a problem.
Yeah. If Bethel loses their second game, do all 3 get in? That type of thing. Boy, that's going to be interesting how that all shakes out. The other thing too, and they've been traditional powers. When you think of playoff football the last 15 years, you think of those 2 schools being in. So it's going to be hard to say how that happens, but 3-loss teams. I mean, again, this new format, certainly things have changed. I mean, you've got the conference champions that have multiple losses that automatically get in, but at large teams with 3 losses, Jason, I don't know.
That's tough for me. I mean, even if they're great losses and losses to teams that are in the postseason, like Georgetown, like Kaiser, those are still losses. And then if you lose to Bethel, you lost to another team in the playoffs. So the argument that I always make back is, yes, your losses were to playoffs teams. You've lost to 3 playoff teams. So explain to me why you should be in the postseason. I'm of the same mindset. You've got to beat the best teams on your schedule. And needless to say, for those 2 teams, the playoffs obviously start this week because a loss doesn't guarantee them anything. A win will guarantee that they're going to make the NAIA championship series.
Why we play it. Great opportunity on the field to settle her.
I brought up this entire league, which you're familiar with, obviously, just to show how stinking tough it has been this year. So you got Indiana Wesleyan sitting on top. As long as, everything doesn't go crazy, they'll probably finish the season undefeated, but they have a very tough Concordia team this week. Okay. So don't go, saying I said that it was going to be easy. You got Marion sitting at 5-1, 8-1 overall. Siena Heights sitting there 4-2 in the conference. St. Francis at 4-2 in the conference. And Concordia, a team that up until last week were sitting there thinking, well, they've got that at-large possibility. They might make it into the postseason. Out of all those teams, technically speaking, now in the Mid-States Football Association Mid-East Division, they're now sitting at number 5. behind those other 4 teams. And this is a Concordia team that, less than a month ago, we're going, maybe hosting something in the first round. Just shows, I think, how tough that Mid-States League has been this year.
No doubt. I mean, we were talking just last week. If they beat St. Francis, they have an argument in that large bid, being third in the league. I mean, really, when you think about it, they had an argument. Siena Heights did beat them head-to-head. I'm going to give a shout-out to Siena Heights, too. The first time they've ever won the state championship in Michigan. They beat all the Michigan teams, first time they've ever done that. So, big game this week for Siena Heights, too, with Marion. Marion's going to come off just an emotional loss in a game that they had big lead in, losing to Indiana Wesleyan. And they got to come back and beat a Siena Heights team who is no joke. I mean, really good football team, great defensively. That's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out, that Marion Siena Heights game. Kind of how things can shake out within the playoffs. I don't think Siena Heights gets in if they beat Marion, but you're talking Marion drop another game. We're talking some interesting things that can shake up or shake out when it comes to playoff pairings. And the Concordia team playing Indiana Wesleyan, that's not a gimme either, like you just said. So this is going to be some games to look at very, very closely here this next week.
I think it's very easy to say right now, the top 2 conferences in the NAIA in terms of competitiveness, in terms of what they bring nationally, the Mid-States Football Association, Mid-East, and the Frontier Conference, just based on what we're talking about. I mean, you've got 4 teams deep there that have beaten one another up. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they should get 4 teams in, because people like to make that argument. Your best teams need to be the representatives. Things shake out. And, yes, it really stinks that 3rd team in your conference didn't make it in, but it goes to show, like, you've got to give some benefit to the top 2 teams that were able to get it done in the Mid-East and also in the Frontier Conference. So some great football being played.
Real quick, Jason, on the East side, I will tell you this from experience watching these teams. I've seen them all play in person. The bottom half of that section, that division, we win a lot of leagues somewhere else. I mean, they're really good football teams. Again, just one of those things like you talk about, the competition level of those teams just beating each other up every single week. They are quality opponents, but you only take a handful, or 2 or 3, 3 at most.
Yeah, I was
St.
really
Francis can beat any one of those teams in any given week. I'm telling you, I watched them play exceptionally well yesterday. Concordia, when healthy, can beat anyone in that league. Siena Heights the same way. So it's good division, and so many of those teams would be in the playoffs if they were in other leagues around the NAIA for sure.
And even as the Mid-States Football Association grows and some new teams come in and you see some people swap over to the other side, there is that potential too to, maybe see somebody pop up into a spot that they haven't been in yet because, they've been in a very tough half, of the league. And the other half of that league, the Midwest, right now you've got 2 teams sitting at 6-3 overall and 4-0 in the conference and playing one another in the final week of the season. So this is truly the playoffs start now for St. Xavier and Roosevelt. The winner of this game will make the postseason. I think either team that loses this game will end up not in the postseason.
It's going to be interesting. You're right with saying I think they have to win to guarantee their spot. But they lost to some upper division teams too.
Lost to Saginaw Valley. Lost to Marion. And then third loss was it's escaping my brain right now.
It might have been Indiana Wesleyan.
Yes.
Crossover. Yeah.
Yes, it was Indiana Wesleyan in a crossover game. You're right.
Yeah. The Saginaw win, you book that game. You're like, we're playing a Division II opponent. It may come back to haunt you. I mean, truthfully. I think St. X is a playoff team. Seeing them in person, I think they've got tons and tons of talent. Losing to the best 2 teams in the Mid-States Association, both East and West. Or there are 2 other losses in addition to a good Division II program. So they better take care of business this weekend with Roosevelt, essentially, because it would be a shame to not see St. X in the playoffs from what I've seen, firsthand from them.
Yeah, Roosevelt is a quality opponent. They haven't continued to improve. Roosevelt has played some very tough competition this year too. Played the defending Division III national champion in North Central. They ended up losing that game. They lost to Bethel on the road. So that's 2 big losses, or 2 losses right there to 2 big good programs. So right. Needless to say, I mean the Lakers, they've got something to play for this weekend, as does X. I mean it should be a great one. Playoff start this week in Chicago, to say the least. Pretty simple in the North Star. It's Dickinson State. I don't know if we need to say anything more.
We said it for like 17 straight years or something. Isn't it something crazy? Same thing every year.
Dickinson has gone through what? 3 different like conference names, I think, in the last 20 years, and still just continue to make it into the postseason. They went
More of
from
the same.
the DAC 10 to the Dakota Athletic Conference to the North Star Athletic Association. Still good, still consistent.
Quick story, real quick. I talk
Yes.
about Coach Bijou, who's my all-time favorite people. Coach Bijou
Yes.
been a legend for how many years? Coach Bijou,
Yes.
every single time at AFCA convention, at NAIA meeting, he'd always introduce himself like no one knew who he was.
Yes.
You remember that?
Yes,
He'd go,
absolutely.
Hank Bijou, Dickinson State University. It's like, Coach, everybody knows who you are.
He always
He's this first-class gentleman. What a gentleman. Always dressed real nice. It was the funniest thing. I thought about you were talking about him last week. I was like, just a first-class guy. We'd always introduce himself anytime he would talk to a group. Like he's he's bringing up business situations around the NAIA, but he'd always introduce himself. And like the second time he would talk within one meeting, he'd still reintroduce himself. It was just fantastic. I always thought he was just a first-class gentleman.
And he had like these giant North Dakota hands. Like the first time I met him, I go to shake his hand, and it's just like, oh, there that goes. And he's just a tremendous guy. Loved Hank Bijou.
Wonderful guy,
great guy. I could tell stories about him for days. My favorite, since I'm sitting in front of a computer, I went into his office. This is probably 15 years ago, and it was before a playoff game. And I walk in, and he's got a computer sitting on his desk, and I emailed him, never got a response. I was like, Coach, I actually thought you didn't have a computer because you're telling me you don't respond to email. He's like, well, there's one in here, Jason. I'm like, oh, well, do you use it? He's like, yeah, I use it every day. I'm like, you do? He's like, yep. I take my sport coat and I hang over it because it keeps the shoulders up nice and firm.
He was a well-dressed man, always a sport coat. Yeah, I could see him not being a tech guy. That's for sure.
100%. When email came along, I think he probably said, not going to do that. Sooner Athletic Conference, Texas Wesleyan can make things very simple if they just win this week against Louisiana Christian. If they lose, now we're talking the potential for a 3-way tie for first place. And I actually did get an email from the sports information director for the Sooner Athletic Conference. I should pull up here. But their tiebreaker is very much the same as the KCAC. So they'll use point differential between the games that the 3 teams played against one another. They'll have something official out on their website Monday. I have not looked into the point differential and all them. I do know that Texas Wesleyan did not beat Ottawa by much, and I know that Louisiana Christian did not lose to Ottawa by much. So you're talking that could be very tight this week, and depending on if Louisiana Christian actually gets that win, say they end up beating Texas Wesleyan by 2 or 3 scores, they could become the representative then. And then you've got Ottawa just hanging out there that's done everything you're supposed to do this season. They lost a game very early on to Texas Wesleyan, and then they beat everybody else. And they've played very well, but that's one of those teams that might be sitting on the outside of the postseason this year.
It's so cool to see. I mean, again, look at the parity here as well. The crazy travel within that league. There's a lot of adversity these teams have to overcome and perform the way they are. So kudos to them. By the way, gold star again for you. The research of the tiebreakers. Look at you. Look at you, man. You're just rolling tonight.
I'm like, I had a busy Sunday, to say the least. Well, Saturday and Sunday, I sent some emails, but it's the sort of information, and not to like hang my hat on anything, but I think people in the NAI are starving for information. They need to have the information out there. So I'm trying to do the best job that I can to get them the most accurate information possible. Sometimes I screw up. A lot of times I screw up, but in this scenario, at least I reached out to the proper people to try to get the information there.
Well,
Sun Conference. Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Pat.
Great job.
Kaiser, right now, they win this week against Florida Memorial. We don't have to worry about anything in this conference. Kaiser's the champion. St. Thomas probably going to get an at-large. If Kaiser loses, now you're talking again, 3 teams, all with 1 loss in the conference. I do not know the tiebreaker in the Sun Conference. So I'm not saying anything could be crazy here. They could lose and still maybe get the automatic as the conference champion, but it's very possible that you have a tiebreaker, and that could put somebody else in the postseason with the automatic. I still think if Kaiser loses, they still make the postseason, but then you've got St. Thomas and Florida Memorial kind of out there in no man's land. Are they going to make it? Are they not going to make it?
Kaiser only losing to Division II programs this year, Jason. Valdosta, and then I think it was
Mississippi College.
Mississippi College, correct? Yeah, that transition from D3 Division II.
Who's John? Is John Bland still the head coach at Mississippi?
That's a great
College?
question. I wondered that. I know he went there after he left Cumberland's. That's one to look up.
I got an iPad.
We have these things called computers that we can look stuff up.
Yeah.
But John was a great guy. Yeah, I assume that he's still there. I haven't heard that he wasn't. But we look at Kaiser. You look at their run last year. This kind of reminds me of that again. What a talented team, and they've proven they can travel and do very, very well. And we know the type of talent they have. They know obviously the recruiting base they pull their talent from. They're a scary, scary team. We talk, about Reinhardt and some folks like these teams, and Kaiser certainly being one of those, proven that just last year.
John's still the head coach.
Here's John.
We'll explain to some people why we're wondering that, but I'll let you finish your thought.
No, I pretty much did. Yeah, just again, Kaiser being the quality team that they are, they've lost to 2 really good Division II programs. They've really, they've obviously held serve at the NAIA level. We know the type of team they are for the run they were on last year. Is there more talent? Is there a more talented team in the NAIA? I don't know, but I think they're one of. I will say that. And it's going to be interesting to see because they have that experience of traveling and making it deep run in the postseason.
I know they're one of the teams that if you end up drawing them for your first game, you're not going to be thrilled about it.
Boy, other than maybe a pretty trip.
Yeah.
That's
if you get to travel there, little fall break. What better, and that's what I look at too sometimes, like Dickinson State is going to make the postseason. If Dickinson State could host a game and say like a St. Thomas has got to go to Dickinson, North Dakota, round 1, how crazy would that be for those kids? And then vice versa, you take the kids out of Western North Dakota and you send them down to Miami Gardens, Florida for their game. I mean, that's what's great about the postseason is there is the potential for some of those matchups. It likely won't happen, in that opening round, but after things get reseeded and worked out, it could be crazy.
And how things have changed over the years too. I'm sorry, Jason.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
You said things have changed now because we had those constant regional matchups back in the day with playoffs. Now you see that, the longer travel even around 1 to, try to have it make it more like the chalk, when you get to that point. But remember how teams would just magically shuffle and move up 4 spots to make the regional matchup just work perfectly to make the travel a little bit better and more conducive for bus travel as opposed to play.
And a lot of times you just look at it and go, well, it's fine. Now they don't have to have a flight. And also when, back then it was just like, is Azusa Pacific going to make it this year? Because if they do, then they're going to have to fly somewhere. Where are they going to fly them to? Yeah. But
we thought we were flying there one time. Like, I'll take a little trip to LA in November. Sounds great to me.
Wouldn't be terrible.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be terrible. So just one quick thing on these last 2 slides. So the Sooner Athletic Conference, these are the teams potentially in the postseason. Okay. And then these are the teams potentially in the postseason for the Sun Conference. If I put you in a time machine 15 years ago, Pat, and I showed you this, I still think you'd probably going, who added football? With like just a ton of new teams, into the NAIA. And it's good to see the NAIA expanding into all these areas too, because it's definitely good for the league. So here's your championship series. If things ended today, who your conference champions would be, and then where your at-larges currently sit. I've got I've got Morningside up there. Technically, they could be below Lindsey Wilson and Bethel as an at-large based on ratings and all this, but they're right now, as of today, they're probably in as an at-large. I would then project, obviously, St. Thomas, Montana Western, and then depending on how Carroll does this weekend, Carroll or Ottawa, Arizona in that game. Teams on the bubble, as we talked about at length through this, you've got Mid-American Nazarene there, Louisiana Christian sitting there, Roosevelt, Baker, Florida Memorial, all of these teams kind of sitting on the bubble, some with a better chance than others to make it into the postseason.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, it's these at large. There's so much shakeup potential here. This last week of the season here, these at large bids. So, everybody's gonna be glued to their televisions this Saturday because it's gonna be a lot of things can happen that we covered. So it's gonna be exciting weekend upcoming.
Again, people, do not take this as Bible. I'm just a guy speculating based on years of experience doing this time and time again, and this could all get shaken. I've had years where I absolutely nailed everything in the postseason, like 1 through 16, who was in, who was out, who was going to make it. And then I've had years where I looked like it was my first year covering the NAI. So it's tough to try to speculate with 1 week left in the season. So our biggest games this week, there's 9 of them that I feel like we've got to keep our eye on. Kaiser, Florida Memorial, Indiana Wesleyan is at Concordia, Siena Heights at Marion. The next 3 games that we've got to keep our eye on: Mid-American Nazarene and Benedictine, Lindsey Wilson and Bethel, Montana Tech and Carroll, and then the last 3, St. Xavier and Roosevelt, Louisiana Christian, Texas Wesleyan, and then College of Idaho at Southern Oregon, because College of Idaho needs to, they've got the conference championship right now, if they win out, but if they lose, now they fall down a little bit in the at-large. Maybe they've got to travel, all sorts of things like that. So there's a lot to be said in this final week of the season. I know I kind of went through those quick. Pat, any particular games you want to add anything on?
No, they're all going to be really, really good. Like you said, I mean, there's literally play-in games. The playoffs start this weekend with these matchups. So, there's 9 matchups there that are must-see. It's going to be interesting, I think, for the Mid-States East Association, because you have teams there that are in the driver's seat, obviously the 1 and the 2, but they're playing quality, really good quality. This is not one they can just, loosen the belt up and just show up and punch a clock and win. It's not that way at all, believe me. It's going to be, and then the Roosevelt St. X game, obviously play-in game. The Bethel Lindsey Wilson game essentially could be play-in game for one. Bethel for sure gets in, I think, with a victory, like we talked about before. But does Lindsey Wilson? We don't know.
So for that first slide, really nobody there play-in game. Lindsey Wilson, Bethel, like you mentioned, that's a play-in game. Montana Tech Carroll, I think, is a hold on to make the postseason game. Benedictine Mid-America, you could see that as a play-in game. Xavier Roosevelt obviously is. Louisiana Christian and Texas Wesleyan, I mean, it's as close as it can be. Louisiana Christian not guaranteed anything with a victory. And then, of course, College of Idaho and Southern Oregon. So some great matchups in NAIA football. It's going to be an awesome week, going final week before we go into the NAIA Championship Series. Very exciting, Pat.
Yeah. Great job, by the way. Just absolutely just buzzing around this place tonight, man. Just we're rolling, man. Just fantastic. Great work. Great research. I mean, you're reaching out to your hundreds of contacts around the NAIA for all these tiebreakers and all the details. So definitely gold star for you tonight, or multiple gold stars. Well done.
We'll put one done, right
sir.
there. A little gold star
done.
For Jason.
It's like you've done this a few times.
The sad thing is, the last couple of years when I wasn't really publicly covering the NAI,
right,
like I would be doing this behind the scenes, and I'd be calling a couple old friends like, well, what do you think? What are you hearing here? What's the tiebreaker over there? And so even though I haven't done it publicly really in the last 10 years, I've been keeping my eye on it. And there was like 1 year, I go back to, I think it was 2013 or 2014. I think I nailed the postseason behind the scenes. And then the next year I really thought got this, and nope, just a giant zero burger, because I would try to do these are the teams that are in and here's who they're going to play, and just absolutely ate it, and just it brought me back down to reality.
This is going to be a lot harder just because of new format too. I mean, so many different variables now, and like we talked about before, the old way, and that's not to be that guy again, but the old way, you could do things very geographic. I mean, it was very, very simple to do for the most part, based upon 1 through 16 and conference champions to be able to shuffle them that 1 through 16. Now this format change really opens a lot of different multitude of opportunities for teams and how things can shake out. So
because back in the day, I mean, first round they tried to keep conference opponents from having to play one another in the postseason. But if you were a conference like the Heart, where you had 2 divisions, they wouldn't have any problem putting those 2 teams against one another in the first round if they hadn't played during the regular season. So you saw some of that happening. New format, like you mentioned, Pat, we can speculate, we can guess. I have reached out to some members of the NAIA Championship Series selection committee to try to get them on the show, or at least just to have a conversation with them. Haven't heard anything back yet from the official side of things, but hopefully I can have a conversation this week just to give me a better understanding, because right now some of this stuff I'm going based on what I've heard in this rumor, and then logic would tell you this, but then sometimes logic doesn't always play out because they don't you don't want to send a team, 23 hours across the country to play a game when 3 hours away from them, they could possibly play a higher seed. So,
in full transparency from my end, I'm not 100% comfortable understanding all the details with the new format. I'm accustomed to the old way, so I'm looking forward to this as much as anyone to see how it all shakes out. But we talked about, I think they're going to get it. They're getting it right with getting more teams opportunities and rewarding the conference champions, because that wasn't always the guarantee before.
Well, and I think that was one of the things when you listen to people's excuses as to why an NAIA school moved to Division III or moved to Division II, that was sometimes a sticking point was, well, we won our conference, but we weren't guaranteed a spot in the postseason. If we move into these other areas, they have regions, and if we win this region, then we've got opportunity. So there's all those sort of things that play into it too. So I like the fact, and I think some people will go, well, that team made it in, and they were 6-5 or 7-4. We'll probably have a 7-4 team in Ottawa. They won their conference. They should be in the postseason, and put them up against somebody. And guess what? They could come away with a victory. And then you kind of go, oh yeah. I always go back to St. Ambrose, who was 7-3 years ago. This was probably 2004, 2005. Mm-hmm. And St. Ambrose had to go on the road and play Mid-America Nazarene, who was undefeated. And Mid-America Nazarene had a film crew kind of filming their postseason, the move into the championship, follow this team as they potentially make a run at the national championship. They're playing 7-3 St. Ambrose first round, and Todd Sturdy's team goes down there and knocks off Mid-America Nazarene, and that was the end of it. And St. Ambrose was 7-3, went 8-3, played a tough game in the second round. Forget who they lost to. I think they might have had to get matched up with St. X in that next round. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah,
or possibly Sioux Falls. Again, regardless.
I know they played Sioux Falls a couple times in that era. Yeah.
Yeah. So regardless of all of that, like 3 and 4 loss teams that are conference champions, I have no problem with them making the postseason. They should. Mm-hmm. It's representative of all the leagues in the NAIA. Get some automatics in there. The at-larges that have 2 or 3 losses, I'm sorry, you have a guaranteed path to make it to the postseason now. Win your conference. And it's the same for every team in the NAIA, whether you're, good old Dana College back in the day. Boy, if we could just win our conference, we'll make it. Mm-hmm. We never had a chance. Yeah, never had a shot. Yeah.
R.I.P. Dana.
4-6, 3-7, 2-8, 1-9. I think
that was your 4
Not in that, but that was my time there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Weren't real good. It's probably my junior year. We'd have been so much better had I not gone down after 5 games with my 3rd concussion, hyperextended elbow, and rolled ankle. That was when I couldn't read the next week. That was kind of when we said, maybe my football career should be over.
Yeah, maybe. You're a tough dude, though, man. You're a tough dude.
No, not at all.
No.
No, I won't bring it up. Sorry. It's a behind the scenes thing. So you said tough dude, and I sent you a couple pictures on email. Let's just say there was a fan of St. Francis at one time that threatened to beat me up. And
yeah, he might have been an Ultimate Fighter too, so you got to be careful. He's a former player.
Yeah. Everything. I was a little scared at first, and then I got a phone call from, it may have been you or somebody else on the staff, and been like, yeah, don't worry. It's been handled. Like, you don't have anything to worry about. So for everybody that's tuned in right now, this show will eventually end. It will be live on YouTube. If you missed the first part of it, you can go back to YouTube. You can watch it there. You can watch it on Twitter. You can watch it on Facebook. As soon as we end the stream, we'll do that. We're done talking NAIA football. This is now just when Pat and Jason catch up with one another and talk about random things. So if you're expecting to hear some just really useful NAIA knowledge, something that you're just going to go, oh boy, howdy, now I got the edge. Yeah, you're not going to get it in these last couple minutes here. So we do appreciate everybody.
Do you think, would people be interested in sending in questions? We could do that too, maybe like a Q&A type deal.
I've actually kind of been watching my Twitter a little bit here because I've had some DMs come in just based on some information. But I think next week, and honestly, if people go to YouTube, they can enter comments on YouTube and I can see them. See, Michael just said yes. Well, actually, I was on Facebook. Michael just said that. So hi, Michael. Hey, if you got a question, fire it away. We got a couple minutes that we'll answer some things here while we randomly talk, because I can you see the comments on your end, Pat?
No, I can't.
Okay. If I see any that come in, I'll let you know. But if somebody's got a question, hit it up on the comments now. We'll go there.
And please don't say Donley's head is gigantic, because I know. Big head.
And if they say it, Pat, I won't pass it on. I know you've got a fragile little spirit.
Oh yeah. I haven't heard that one before.
So what happened in the Donley household this week? Anything of crazy events? Any hockey? Any?
Yeah, I had a hockey game today. It was a lot of fun. Actually, so the Fort Wayne Memorial Coliseum is our ECHL team. So
okay,
basically essentially double A for hockey from the NHL. So we got to play there today. My son, his team got to play there. Won a 5-4 tight game today in a Little Caesars Amateur Hockey League game. So a lot of fun.
Nice.
It was cool. Play out of the Detroit League, so we traveled quite a bit with hockey. But yeah, a big win today for the boys, and that was fun. Pretty much it. Did have a Halloween party. Some friends, like old guy Halloween party. We did the week after, a lot of our friends. So yeah, we did that. You get to a point where like in your 40s, like dressing up. I know you're really into Halloween, like dressing up. I've seen the timeline pictures of stuff you've done in the past.
A couple times I haven't dressed up in quite a while. Definitely the one that turned the most heads was the year I went as Britney Spears.
That's what I'm referring to. That was fantastic.
Full schoolgirl outfit and everything, gut hanging out, short shorts. Like that was a catch.
Yeah, that was the one I was referring to.
Yes.
I saw that across your timeline on Halloween. I'm like, that's fantastic. And I do remember when it happened, but yeah, I need a refresher to see that photo again. That was
many years ago.
That was how about you?
I changed the worst diaper in the history of my daughter. Well, actually, no, I back up. I didn't change it. I discovered it when we went out for breakfast this morning at this great place in Fargo, like local restaurant. Awesome. Just great. I got fat and happy. Came home, was taking a daughter out of her car seat, did the old like reach underneath to pull her out and went, oh, that's yellow stained, like stained your skin. So I got her. I'm like, well, do you want to change her or clean the car seat? And, Heather looked down and went, I'll change her. You do the car seat. So I'm cleaning the car seat and I hear from the back room, and I was like, was that fake or was that real? She's like, that one was actually kind of real. It's pretty terrible. So that was my.
I don't want to state the obvious again. You're way too old to have a kid that young. My goodness. I don't know how you're doing it, buddy. I did not miss those days at all.
I think having my first child at age 43, I think it's actually been good because I just like all the other things in my life. Like I go to work, I come home from work. I don't have a bunch of other things like, oh, these friends are getting ready to do this, or oh, we got this boys trip planned. I've done most of that. I still am gonna do those things, but like I want to go to work during the day. I want to come home. I want to play with my daughter and make her laugh and go, I still got it. She still likes me. Give it a couple years. But yeah. Oh, I did get a question come in. Hey. Coach Donley's thoughts on Andrew Road offend going up against Joshua Shoemaker's defense. Offense. Okay. Correct himself.
Of course, there's a history there with those guys.
Okay. Explain.
Yeah. But because I know Coach was at he was at Concordia, then went to Morningside from Concordia, if I'm not mistaken. I believe so. That timeline. That runs together for me. It's been so many years, but there's a connection. I know Coach Rohde worked at Concordia and left there for Morningside, I think circa 17, maybe 18, 2018. Okay. Something like that. Then got the head job at Indiana Wesleyan this past year. Yeah. I mean, really, really bright guys, both guys. I think exceptional talents in our level of football. Coach Schumacher, exceptional in defense, multiplicity, the blitz looks, the exotic covers, and do a great job disguising everything. But I think Coach Rohde does a great job really taking that Morningside system, looking at Indiana. I've watched Indiana Wesleyan, one in person and one on film, these last 2 weeks. It looks like Morningside to me when they were winning national championships. The system is very, very similar of how they do everything from communication, from their tempo usage, formations, tons and tons of movement. They want to create motions to create confusion, to show people's hands of what they're getting defensively. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup and a good chess match between two really good coaches, head coaches that are really the coordinators of their units, offensively and defensively with those guys. So we talked about Jason. I think it's a really interesting matchup. I don't count Concordia out. I really don't, especially going up there. That's a hard place to play. It just is. Don't know what weather's going to be like in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're getting in here to second week of November. It could be anything. You could see snow. You could driving rain, whatever it may be. And for whatever reason, it is challenging to play there. When I was at St. Francis, we didn't really ever perform very well there. It's a tough situation. So, and they get after it at home. So that's going to be an interesting game. I think it's a great question. I think two of the premier, minds, both offensively and defensively, going head to head, and they have a background of being together, working together. So it's going to be interesting to see for sure. Good question.
Last question is that we probably should wrap things up. We're approaching an hour and a half here, and I still have to go in and eat dinner with the wife and daughter here tonight. So I, got to do that. Last question. If the Mid-States Football Association Mid-East were to play the Frontier next week, where do you have the results overall? So roughly 5-5 or 10-0. So let's just say the top teams faced off against top teams. So you got, let's say, Indiana Wesleyan, College of Idaho. My opinion, I'd say Indiana Wesleyan.
It's a good one, and the travel's huge. If you have a neutral site, if they're meeting in Kansas City,
let's say neutral site game in a dome, like just
Fargo
absolute, Dome. Fargo Dome, exactly.
Both are traveling the same distance, because we all know the travel at the NAIA level does present challenges. It does affect outcome. I believe that it does.
Mm-hmm.
From being on both sides of hosting, teams that travel and traveling distance, it does matter. If it's a neutral site, if it's everything is equal. I like Wesleyan in it, Wesleyan in a tight game. Watching both teams pretty closely. I think they're both exceptionally well coached. But I think Indiana Wesleyan just a bit stronger. But it's a good game, certainly. And it can be a great playoff matchup.
And I think Marion versus like Montana Western, still very split down the middle. My brain said Montana Western, just as what I've seen from them. But I could see Marion. So I think I think we're talking your top two, it's 50-50. That one could go either way. We get down to, let's say, our third place team, let's say Carroll College going up against technically probably Siena Heights right now based on record.
Yeah.
I'd probably go Carroll in that game.
Sure. Yep.
We go down one, we say Montana Tech going up against Concordia or St. Francis, depending on how you put it there.
Right.
I'd probably go Mid-States in that one, but we're just guessing at this point. So I think maybe the answer to the question is, Michael said, so roughly 5-5 or 10-0. I think it's probably 5-5.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty even.
Balanced. If you go back in history, I know it doesn't matter today, but you go back in history, when those conferences would match up, the home team always win.
Yeah.
That's my English win. One, it was because of travel. I mean, that was it. So again, if it's a neutral site, that's really, really interesting. But I remember, Montana Tech came to us, we beat them. Every time we went to Carroll College, they beat us. Back and forth. I know when Marion would travel to Carroll would win tight football games. They had that advantage of hosting and dealing with that long travel for your opponent. So neutral site, it could be very, very interesting. And I would agree with you. Like, it's probably that 5-5 type situation. Maybe
Folks, we'll be back next week at this time. We got to wrap it up. We got to go.
Sorry.
We'll be back next week at the same time, 6 Central, 7 Eastern. We'll be talking about the NAIA Championship Series. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, all those things this week. We'll have more announcements about what's coming out. Pat, any last thoughts?
No.
All right. Good show, buddy. Appreciate it.
Great job. Again, outstanding. Kudos to you.
Yes. Thank you.
The research guru today, just absolutely buzzing around. Awesome. So impressed.
For Pat Donley, I'm Jason Dannelly. This has been NAIA Football with Dannelly and Donley. We will see you next week, same time, same place. And we're out.